Welcome back to the channel. Today we are breaking down one of the most emotionally powerful and culturally significant superhero films of the last decade. We are talking about Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, the 2022 Marvel Studios sequel that not only continued one of the MCU's greatest stories but also served as a deeply personal and heartfelt tribute to the legendary Chadwick Boseman. So sit back, because we are going to cover absolutely everything about this film, starting from the very beginning. Overview. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever is a 2022 American superhero film produced by Marvel Studios and distributed by Walt Disney Studios Motion Pictures. It was directed by Ryan Coogler, written by Coogler alongside Joe Robert Cole, and produced by Kevin Feige and Nate Moore. The film is a direct sequel to the groundbreaking 2018 original, Black Panther, which became a cultural phenomenon and one of the highest-grossing superhero films in history. What makes this film truly unique in the history of superhero cinema is the extraordinary challenge it had to overcome before a single frame was even shot. In August 2020, Chadwick Boseman, the soul and face of the Black Panther franchise, passed away from colon cancer at only 43 years old. His death shocked the entire world and sent Marvel Studios into a deeply uncertain territory. Rather than recasting the role of T'Challa, director Ryan Coogler made the brave and respectful decision to rewrite the entire film as a story of grief, legacy, and succession. The story was reshaped so that Wakanda itself, and the people who loved T'Challa, would have to carry on without him, just as the real world had to carry on without Chadwick Boseman. Producer Nate Moore confirmed that there was a genuine moment when Marvel wondered whether a sequel should even be made at all. But given the world's overwhelming reaction to Boseman's passing, everyone involved felt the most meaningful thing to do was to honor his memory through the film itself. And that decision, to memorialize rather than replace, is exactly what gives this movie its emotional depth and its lasting impact on audiences around the world. The film has a runtime of 161 minutes, carries a PG-13 rating, and serves as the final chapter of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's Phase 4. In terms of scope, ambition, and emotional complexity, it stands as one of the most complete and layered entries in the entire MCU catalog. Plot details. The story opens with one of the most emotionally devastating sequences in Marvel history. Shuri, the brilliant princess of Wakanda and sister to T'Challa, is desperately trying to recreate the heart-shaped herb, a powerful plant that grants the Black Panther extraordinary abilities. The herb had previously been destroyed by the villain Eric Killmonger. Shuri is working against the clock, trying to save her brother's life, but she fails. King T'Challa dies from an unspecified terminal illness, and Wakanda is plunged into mourning. The Marvel Studios opening logo itself reflects this loss, as it plays without music and features imagery of Chadwick Boseman in tribute. 1 year after T'Challa's death, Wakanda is under significant pressure from the rest of the world. Other nations are demanding that Wakanda share its vibranium, the extraordinarily powerful and rare metal that is the source of Wakanda's technological supremacy. Some parties are even attempting to steal it by force. Queen Ramonda, the grieving mother of T'Challa and Shuri, addresses the United Nations with strength and authority, making it clear that Wakanda will not be intimidated. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, a CIA operation is attempting to locate a vibranium deposit using a newly developed machine. However, the mission is attacked by a group of mysterious, powerful underwater warriors. These warriors belong to Tenoch, a hidden underwater civilization of immense power and ancient origins. Their ruler is Namor, a fierce, winged, and nearly immortal leader who has protected his people in secrecy for centuries. Namor approaches Wakanda and warns Queen Ramonda that the surface world's search for vibranium threatens Tenoch's existence, and he demands that Wakanda help him find and eliminate the scientists who built the vibranium detecting machine. Otherwise Tenoch will declare war on the surface world and Wakanda will be seen as an enemy. The scientist in question turns out to be Riri Williams, a brilliantly gifted young engineering student at MIT who independently built the machine without knowing the full consequences of her invention. Shuri and Okoye are sent to find Riri before Namor's forces do, but Tolokan warriors intercept them. In the confrontation, Okoye is stripped of her Dora Milaje status by Queen Ramonda for failing to protect Shuri, which adds another layer of internal tension to an already fractured Wakanda. Namor's forces launch a devastating surprise attack on Wakanda, flooding the Golden City and killing Queen Ramonda herself, which becomes the most emotionally crushing moment of the film. Ramonda drowns while heroically saving Riri Williams. Shuri, consumed by grief and rage after losing both her brother and her mother, becomes the emotional center of the story. She is no longer just a scientist or a princess. She is a woman on the edge, driven by pain and a desperate need for revenge. With the help of Baku and the remaining forces of Wakanda, Shuri devises a plan to stop Namor. Using a synthetic version of the heart-shaped herb she finally manages to recreate, Shuri undergoes the ritual to become the new Black Panther. In her ancestral plane vision, she sees not T'Challa, but the spirit of Eric Killmonger, which reflects how consumed she is by vengeance at this point in her journey. The final battle takes place on the open ocean. Wakanda engages the forces of Tolokan in an epic and visually spectacular confrontation. Shuri lures Namor away from the water, his source of power, onto a vessel where she uses fire and sun to weaken him. The fight between them is brutal and emotional. Ultimately, Shuri defeats Namor but chooses not to kill him, channeling the lessons her brother always embodied, strength tempered by wisdom and compassion. Namor agrees to a ceasefire, and the two civilizations reach a fragile peace. In the deeply moving final scene, Shuri travels alone to Haiti, where she finally allows herself to grieve. She burns her funeral clothes on the beach, a Wakandan mourning ritual she had refused to perform earlier because she was not ready to accept her brother's death. The film closes with a post-credits scene revealing that T'Challa had a son named Toussaint, born to him and Nakia in secret, giving audiences a hopeful and beautiful look at the future of the Black Panther legacy. Cast. The ensemble cast of this film is extraordinary and filled with performances that elevate the material beyond the typical superhero blockbuster. Letitia Wright leads the film as Shuri, T'Challa's genius younger sister who ultimately takes on the mantle of Black Panther. Wright carries the entire emotional weight of the movie on her shoulders and delivers the most demanding and nuanced performance of her career. Angela Bassett plays Queen Ramonda, the sovereign queen of Wakanda and grieving mother. Her performance is so powerful and commanding that it earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, making her the first Marvel actor ever to receive an Oscar nomination for a superhero role. Tenoch Huerta makes his Marvel debut as Namor, the King of Tolokan. His portrayal of the complex, ancient, and morally layered villain is one of the most compelling antagonist performances in MCU history. Lupita Nyong'o returns as Nakia, T'Challa's former love and Wakandan war dog who has been living in Haiti. Her role in the final act of the film is deeply emotional. Denai Gurira is back as Okoye, the fierce general of the Dora Milaje, who goes through her own journey of loss, shame, and redemption throughout the film. Winston Duke reprises his fan-favorite role as M'Baku, leader of the Jabari tribe, bringing both powerful presence and well-timed humor to his scenes. Martin Freeman returns as Everett Ross, the CIA agent with ties to Wakanda, who finds himself caught between his duty to the American government and his loyalty to the Wakandans. Dominique Thorne makes her Marvel debut as Riri Williams, the young MIT engineer who becomes Ironheart, a character significant enough to have her own Disney Plus series in development. Michaela Seal plays Annika, a Dora Milaje warrior with a strong and striking screen presence. Mabel Cadena and Alex Livanali round out the Tolokan side as Namora and Atuma respectively, both bringing a fearsome energy to their roles. Julia Louis-Dreyfus also appears as Valentina Allegra de Fontaine, the director of the CIA, continuing her arc from other MCU projects. Florence Kasumba returns as Ao, a senior member of the Dora Milaje, bringing elegance and ferocity to her scenes. The film's music was composed by Ludwig Göransson, who returned from the first film and delivered a score that blends African and Mesoamerican influences to reflect both Wakanda and Tenoch with incredible depth. Cinematography was handled by Autumn Durald-Arkapaw, and the film was shot primarily at Trilith Studios in Atlanta with additional filming in locations that helped bring both civilizations to vivid life. Release date and trailer info. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever had its world premiere on October 26, 2022, in Hollywood, Los Angeles. It was then released worldwide for general audiences on November 11, 2022, coinciding with Veterans Day weekend in the United States, which gave it an additional boost at the box office. The first teaser trailer was released at San Diego Comic-Con in July 2022 and gave audiences their first emotional look at a Wakanda in mourning, set to a haunting rendition of the song No Woman No Cry. The second full trailer dropped on October 3, 2022, and was far more action-packed, confirming for the first time that Shuri would be taking on the Black Panther suit, and giving audiences their first proper look at Riri Williams in her Ironheart armor. Box office and critical reception. The film carried a production budget of approximately $250 million, making it at the time of its release the most expensive film ever made featuring a black lead actor. Despite the enormous challenges involved in its production, including the reshaping of the entire story after Chadwick Boseman's death and an on-set injury to Letitia Wright that required filming to be suspended, the film delivered in a massive way. On its opening weekend, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever earned $180 million domestically and $330 million globally, setting the record for the biggest November opening weekend in North American box office history. It went on to gross a total of $859.2 million worldwide, earning a solid profit on its budget despite falling short of the original film's $1.35 billion run. Critics and audiences both responded with genuine warmth. The film holds an 84% certified fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes from critics and a 94% audience score, reflecting how deeply it resonated with viewers on an emotional level. It was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, including Best Supporting Actress for Angela Bassett, Best Original Song, Best Costume Design, Best Makeup and Hairstyling, and Best Visual Effects. It took home the Oscar for Best Costume Design. Ryan Coogler himself described the experience of finishing the film as deeply emotional and final, saying that in a way the cast and crew had been keeping Chadwick Boseman alive by working on the film, and that completing it made his absence feel real in a way it had not before. Final thoughts. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever is not just a superhero movie. It is a film about loss, about the courage it takes to keep going after someone irreplaceable is gone, and about what it means to carry a legacy forward with integrity. It honors Chadwick Boseman not by pretending he never existed, but by showing how deeply his absence is felt, and how the people who loved him find the strength to continue. In doing so, it became one of the most human and emotionally resonant films in the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. The complete story of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. The opening, the death of a king. The film begins in a place of utter desperation and heartbreak. Inside a lab deep within the royal palace of Wakanda, Princess Shuri, the brilliant and beloved younger sister of King T'Challa, is working with frantic intensity. Her king, her brother, is dying. T'Challa has been struck down by a mysterious and unspecified terminal illness, and Shuri, the most gifted technological mind in the world, is doing everything in her power to save him. She is trying to synthetically recreate the heart-shaped herb, a sacred and powerful plant native to Wakanda that is deeply connected to the powers of the Black Panther. The herb had been deliberately destroyed years earlier by Eric Killmonger during his violent takeover of Wakanda's throne, and without it, the traditional path to saving T'Challa through its miraculous properties is gone. Shuri is working against time, pouring everything she knows into building a synthetic version, but it is not enough. Before she can complete her work, before she can even come close to a solution, her mother, Queen Ramonda, enters the room and tells her quietly and devastatingly that T'Challa is gone. King T'Challa, the Black Panther, the protector of Wakanda and one of the greatest kings the nation has ever known, has passed away. What follows is one of the most emotionally powerful sequences in the history of Marvel Studios. Wakanda mourns in a way that is deeply rooted in African tradition and cultural richness. A shaman leads a ceremony in an open clearing. The people of Wakanda dress in white, the color of mourning in their tradition. T'Challa's coffin is carried with extraordinary reverence. The nation bows its head in grief. The Marvel Studios logo that opens the film does not play with its usual triumphant music. Instead, it plays in silence, adorned with images of Chadwick Boseman as T'Challa, a quiet and deeply moving tribute to the actor who gave this character his soul. The funeral of T'Challa is not just a fictional event happening on screen. It is a real act of mourning, a message from the filmmakers and the cast to the world, saying goodbye to a man who meant everything to this franchise and to so many people around the globe. 1 year later, a wounded Wakanda. 1 year has passed since T'Challa's death. The nation of Wakanda is still grieving, still finding its footing in a world that suddenly feels more dangerous and uncertain than it ever did when their king was alive. Queen Ramonda has stepped into the role of sovereign with grace and iron resolve, but the wound is fresh and the kingdom is under extraordinary pressure from the outside world. The discovery that Wakanda possesses vibranium, the rarest and most powerful metal on Earth, has made it a target. Other nations, particularly powerful Western governments, are desperate to gain access to Wakandan vibranium, either through diplomacy or by force. At the United Nations, Ramonda stands before the nations of the world with absolute dignity and authority. She makes it clear that Wakanda will not be bullied, threatened, or manipulated. The death of their king has not weakened them. If anything, it has made them more determined to protect what is theirs. She demonstrates this resolve when Okoye, the fierce general of the Dora Milaje, Wakanda's elite female warrior unit, captures a group of soldiers who had attempted to steal vibranium from a Wakandan vessel the night before. Ramonda has them brought into the UN chamber and made to kneel before the assembled nations, a powerful and unmistakable message that Wakanda will always strike back. Despite Ramonda's strength, there is deep pain beneath the surface of everything. Shuri has withdrawn into herself. She refuses to continue her research on the heart-shaped herb. She has concluded that the Black Panther is a thing of the past, a symbol that belongs to T'Challa and T'Challa alone. She does not believe in the ancestral plane or many of the spiritual traditions of Wakanda. She is a scientist. She believes in what she can see and prove. Her grief has calcified into a kind of numbness, and she keeps herself busy in her lab because staying still means having to feel everything she is trying to avoid. A threat from the deep, the arrival of Tenoch. Meanwhile, in the vast and largely unexplored depths of the Atlantic Ocean, something ancient and deadly is stirring. A CIA operation, led by Dr. Graham, is aboard a vessel using a newly developed vibranium detecting machine to locate vibranium deposits deep beneath the ocean floor. 2 divers are sent below, and they discover that their deep-sea mining drill has been completely destroyed. Before they can even process what happened, they are taken and killed by unseen attackers moving with terrifying speed and precision in the dark water below. What rises from the depths is something no one on the surface world has ever seen or even imagined. Blue-skinned warriors, the Tenochans, emerge from the ocean and attack the vessel with devastating efficiency, killing the CIA team. Dr. Graham and her colleague try to escape in a helicopter, but their escape is cut short by the appearance of an extraordinary figure who tears the helicopter out of the sky with his bare hands and hurls it into the ocean. This figure is Namor, the ruler of Tenoch, and his arrival signals the beginning of a conflict that will shake the entire world. Not long after, Namor himself comes to Wakanda. He moves through the nation's defenses with a terrifying ease that makes clear he is not an ordinary adversary. He meets with Ramonda and Shuri, and what he tells them changes everything. Namor blames Wakanda for the current crisis. He says that when Wakanda revealed its existence, and its vibranium to the world, it set off a chain reaction. The surface world, now knowing that vibranium exists, began searching for it everywhere. And that search has led them dangerously close to Tenoch, Namor's hidden underwater kingdom, a civilization of extraordinary depth and power that has remained secret from the surface world for centuries. Namor gives Wakanda an ultimatum. Find the scientists who built the vibranium detecting machine and hand them over to him, or Tenoch will attack Wakanda with a fury that will leave nothing standing. Ramonda and Shuri are caught in an impossible position. They do not want war. But they also cannot simply surrender someone to be killed. Riri Williams and the chase in Boston. With the help of Everett Ross, their ally inside the CIA, Shuri and Okoye track down the identity of the scientist responsible. To their astonishment, the person who built a machine capable of detecting vibranium is not some government scientist or military contractor. It is Riri Williams, a young, brilliantly gifted engineering student at MIT who built the device independently as part of her academic work, without fully understanding the enormous and dangerous implications of what she had created. Shuri and Okoye travel to Boston to find Riri before Namor's forces do. What follows is a chaotic and breathless sequence. The FBI, aware that something is happening, arrives to apprehend Riri as well. Then Namor's warriors, the Tenochans, show up with ferocious power. Okoye fights with everything she has, but the Tenochan warriors are extraordinarily strong and capable, especially in water. They defeat Okoye decisively. Shuri and Riri are captured and taken beneath the ocean, pulled down into the world of Tenoch to meet Namor face to face. Back in Wakanda, the consequences of this failure are swift. Queen Ramonda, devastated and furious, strips Okoye of her status and rank within the Dora Milaje. It is a crushing blow to Okoye, who has devoted her entire life to Wakanda and to her duty as a warrior. To lose her position is to lose a core part of her identity. Okoye must now face her failure not just professionally but personally, grappling with what it means to be a Wakandan warrior without the uniform and title she has always carried. Tenoch, the world beneath the waves. Shuri and Riri are brought to Tenoch, and what they find is breathtaking. Tenoch is not some primitive underwater colony. It is an ancient, highly advanced, and deeply beautiful civilization, rich with culture, history, and power. The city glows with bioluminescent light beneath the ocean, and its people are strong, proud, and deeply loyal to their king. Namor sits with Shuri and begins to tell her the story of his people, and it is a story that reframes everything about who he is and why he has made the choices he has made. Centuries earlier, in the 1500s, his mother's people were living in the Yucatan region of what is now Mexico. They were a Mayan civilization being devastated by the arrival of colonizers and the diseases they brought with them. Smallpox was destroying the village. In their desperation, the people were called by the rain god Tlaloc to drink from a rare vibranium-infused flower growing beneath the water. When they did, they were physically transformed, becoming beings capable of living and thriving in the ocean. But they could no longer survive on the surface for extended periods. They were cast out of the world they had known and forced to build a new one beneath the waves. Namor himself was born in this transformation. His mother was pregnant when the people underwent their change, and he was born with small wings on his ankles that allow him to fly. He was also born with the ability to survive on both the surface and beneath the water, making him unique even among his people. He watched the surface world throughout the centuries, saw its violence, its colonialism, its greed, and its endless desire to take what belongs to others. Every instinct he developed was to protect Tenoch from the same fate that nearly destroyed his ancestors. He named himself Namor, a word meaning the one without love in Spanish, because he has never had love or mercy for the surface world. He shows Shuri the vast and extraordinary splendor of Tenoch. He wants her to understand not just what he is fighting for, but what he has already built, and what he is prepared to do to protect it. He also tells her something that shifts her understanding of the situation entirely. He does not want to destroy Wakanda. He wants Wakanda as an ally. He sees a shared destiny between their two civilizations, both hidden, both powerful, both rich in vibranium, both constantly threatened by a surface world driven by exploitation and greed. He proposes an alliance. Together, Tenoch and Wakanda could stand against anyone. But he also makes clear what happens if Wakanda refuses. He will destroy them. Nakia's rescue. While Shuri and Riri are in Tenoch, Queen Ramonda is working desperately to find them and bring them home. She travels to Haiti, where Nakia, T'Challa's former love and one of Wakanda's most skilled war dogs, has been living in quiet exile since the events of the blip, the global catastrophe caused by Thanos. Nakia has been running a school in Haiti, living a life far removed from the battlefield, but she has never stopped caring about Wakanda or the people she loves. Ramonda finds her and tells her what has happened. Without hesitation, Nakia agrees to go to Tenoch and bring Shuri and Riri home. She dives into the ocean and infiltrates Tenoch with the precise, fearless skill of someone who has spent her life operating in impossible situations. She successfully extracts Shuri and Riri, but in the process, several Tenoch warriors are killed. This incident, which might have been avoided had Wakanda simply engaged in negotiation, lights the match that leads to open conflict. Namor feels that Wakanda has chosen war by sending a rescue mission rather than responding to his offer of alliance. He decides it is time to make his power undeniable. He will attack the Golden City of Wakanda itself. The attack on Wakanda, the death of Ramonda. What happens next is one of the most dramatic and emotionally catastrophic sequences in the entire film. Namor's forces launch a devastating and overwhelming surprise attack on Wakanda. Tenoch warriors pour in from every direction. They flood the Golden City, using the water itself as a weapon. The Dora Milaje and Wakanda's military fight back with everything they have, but the Tenoch warriors are relentless and ferocious. In the chaos of the battle, Ramonda finds herself in a terrible situation. Riri Williams is in danger of drowning as the flooding overtakes the area around her. Ramonda makes an instantaneous and selfless decision. She dives in and pushes Riri to safety, getting her above the waterline. But in doing so, Ramonda herself is pulled under. She drowns in the flooded waters of her own kingdom, sacrificing her life to save a young woman she barely knows. Queen Ramonda, the sovereign of Wakanda, the mother of T'Challa and Shuri, the woman who held her nation together with unwavering strength through the most devastating period in its history, is dead. When Shuri learns of her mother's death, something inside her breaks completely and irreparably, at least for a time. She has already lost T'Challa, her brother, her protector, her closest companion. Now she has lost Ramonda, the last remaining pillar of her family. Shuri becomes the Black Panther. In the aftermath of the attack, Wakanda regroups in the mountain realm of the Jabari, whose leader M'Baku has remained a loyal and steadfast ally. Shuri retreats into her work with a singular, furious purpose. Using a critical piece of information she gathered during her time in Tenoch, she focuses on a bracelet that Namor gave to her as a gesture of goodwill during her visit to his kingdom. The bracelet, which had belonged to Namor's mother and was passed down to him, contains traces of DNA from the vibranium-infused underwater plant that granted Namor's people their powers. This plant is essentially Tenoch's version of Wakanda's heart-shaped herb. Both plants were nourished and transformed by vibranium. Shuri analyzes the bracelet and uses it to finally achieve what she could not do years earlier. She recreates the heart-shaped herb, this time with enough accuracy and efficacy to work. It is both a scientific breakthrough and a deeply painful moment, because the last time she tried to recreate the herb, it was to save her brother's life, and she failed. Now she succeeds, but there is no joy in it, only the cold satisfaction of a weapon forged from grief. Nakia and Riri stand watch over Shuri as she performs the ritual of consuming the herb. The danger is real. Her heart could stop. But Shuri is beyond fear at this point. She swallows the herb and enters the ancestral plane. What happens in the ancestral plane is one of the most psychologically rich and disturbing moments of the film. Shuri does not see Chala. She does not see Ramonda. The person waiting for her in the ancestral plane is Eric Killmonger, the villain of the first film, the man whose rage and vengeance nearly destroyed Wakanda. Killmonger appears because Shuri, despite what she tells herself, does not truly believe in the ancestral plane. And so her subconscious conjures the figure that most closely mirrors what she is feeling right now, which is Killmonger's particular brand of grief turned into burning, unstoppable anger. Killmonger tells her something that cuts to the bone. He tells her that Chala did not have the courage to kill him when he had the chance. He tells her that the only way she will ever find peace is to do what her brother could not, to burn everything down, to kill Namor, to let vengeance run its course. He frames it as freedom. He frames it as justice. And the most terrifying part is that in her current state, Shuri wants to believe him. She comes back from the ancestral plane shaken and burning with purpose. She does not tell Nakia or Riri what she saw. She suits up as the new Black Panther, stepping into the role that her brother held and that she once thought belonged only to him. The suit is new, designed by Shuri herself, and it is extraordinary. She arrives at a gathering of Wakanda's leadership in the Jabari Mountains and announces her plan. She will lead the fight against Loken, and she intends to kill Namor. Baku pulls her aside. Of all the people who could reach her, Baku is one of the most unexpected, and yet he makes his attempt with honesty and care. He tells her that killing Namor will not bring her peace. It will only bring eternal war. He reminds her of what Chala stood for, not just strength, but wisdom, not just power, but the courage to choose a harder path. He asks her to remember who her brother was. Shuri hears him, but she is not ready to listen. Not yet. The final battle. Wakanda's forces take the fight to Namor and the Talakanal on the open ocean. The battle that follows is spectacular and brutal, a full-scale war between two civilizations that are both extraordinary and both fighting for what they believe in. The Dora Milaje and Wakanda's war vessels meet Loken's warriors on the water, with forces on both sides fighting with everything they have. Shuri has a specific plan for Namor. His greatest weakness is that he draws his power from water. When he is in the ocean, he is nearly invincible. But on the surface, away from the water, his strength depletes. Shuri lures him onto a vessel and uses fire to heat the air around them, driving the moisture and humidity away. As the fight between them escalates, she uses this to push him to his limits. The fight is vicious, personal, and exhausting. Namor is staggering, weakening under the relentless combination of heat and Shuri's ferocious determination. She gets him to the point where she can kill him. She has a weapon at his throat. The moment that Killmonger told her to reach for is right there in her hands. And she stops. She stops because in that precise moment, despite everything, despite all the rage and the grief and the darkness that has been building inside her since the moment she lost her brother, and then her mother, she hears something. Not a voice. Not a vision. But a feeling. An understanding. Chala's death taught the world that Wakanda is not invulnerable. Ramonda's death taught Shuri what it means to lose the people you love. And standing over Namor with a weapon in her hand, she finally understands something Killmonger never did, that this is exactly the moment when the Black Panther's true power matters most. Not the power to kill. The power to choose not to. She pulls back. She tells Namor that if he surrenders, she will make Wakanda a protector of the oceans and an ally to Tenoch. She promises him that the surface world will not reach Tenoch as long as Wakanda stands. Namor, exhausted and facing defeat, accepts. His lieutenants, particularly Namora, are furious. They believe he should fight to the death. But Namor, always thinking several moves ahead, explains his reasoning to her privately afterward. He believes that eventually the surface world will rise against both Wakanda and Tenoch. When that day comes, they will need each other. His surrender is not weakness. It is strategy. The aftermath and the healing. In the quiet that follows the battle, Wakanda begins the slow and difficult process of rebuilding and healing. M'Baku steps forward as a potential leader, hinting that he may challenge for the throne. Okoye, stripped of her title, finds an unexpected new role and path through a separate mission within the film, ultimately finding her way back to purpose even without her former rank. Everett Ross, who has been caught between his loyalty to Wakanda and his duty to the American government, faces his own consequences from the CIA for the information he shared. Riri Williams goes home. She is not allowed to take her Ironheart suit with her, a suit she built during her time with Wakanda after losing the original in the battle. But it is a fair trade for her life, and her story is clearly far from over. Shuri does not stay in Wakanda. She cannot. Not yet. She needs to grieve in a way she has never allowed herself to, and she knows exactly where she has to go. The ending, Shuri and the boy on the beach. Shuri travels to Haiti, to where Nakia has been living. She goes alone, carrying with her the mourning clothes she was supposed to burn at Chala's funeral, a ritual she refused to perform at the time because she was not ready to accept that he was gone. To burn the clothes is to say goodbye. And for a long time, she could not do it. She builds a fire on the beach. The warm light of the setting sun fills the air around her. She feeds the mourning clothes into the fire, and she watches them burn. She allows herself, finally, to feel what she has been running from since the beginning of the film. She cries. Not for show, not with anyone watching her. Just alone on a beach in Haiti, finally saying goodbye to her brother and her mother in the most honest and private way she knows how. It is then that Nakia brings someone to her. A small boy, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, with bright eyes and a quiet, steady presence that immediately recalls someone Shuri has known her whole life. Nakia introduces the boy, whose name is Toussaint. She then tells Shuri his Wakandan name, Chala. Chala and Nakia had a son together in secret, keeping the boy hidden from Wakanda and from the world to protect him from the enormous weight and danger that comes with being the son of the Black Panther. The child has been living safely in Haiti with his mother, surrounded by ordinary life, shielded from the expectations and threats that would have consumed his childhood had the world known he existed. Shuri looks at the boy, and in his face she sees her brother. She sees the future. She sees that Chala's legacy is not just a mantle to be passed from warrior to warrior. It is a living, breathing human being, full of all the possibility and promise that his father carried. The Black Panther lives on. Not through a suit or a title, but the film ends on this quiet, beautiful, and deeply moving note, an answer to grief that is not vengeance, not power, not even justice. It is continuity. It is love. It is the knowledge that even when the people we love are taken from us, something of them always remains. The mid-credits scene. The film's mid-credits scene is the same moment described above, the revelation of Toussaint, presented as an emotional coda to everything that came before. There is no additional post-credits scene, a deliberate choice that reflects the film's tone. This is not a movie that races toward the next thing. It is a film that asks you to sit with what you have just witnessed, to grieve alongside its characters, and to carry something real with you when you leave. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever is ultimately a film about what we do with grief, about whether we let it destroy us or whether we let it change us into something stronger, something more compassionate, and something more worthy of the people we lost. It is a story about Wakanda, yes, but more deeply, it is a story about Chadwick Boseman, told by people who loved him, in the only language they had available to them, cinema. And in that sense, it is one of the most genuinely human films Marvel has ever made. The complete life histories of the cast of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Letitia Wright. Letitia Michelle Wright was born on October 31, 1993, in Georgetown, Guyana, which is a small country located on the northeastern coast of South America. She spent the earliest years of her childhood in Guyana before her family made the significant decision to relocate to the United Kingdom when she was 7 years old. They settled in Tottenham, a neighborhood in North London, and it was there that Letitia began to find herself and discover who she was meant to become. Growing up in Tottenham was not always easy. The neighborhood was known for its economic challenges and its complex social environment, and Letitia, as a young Caribbean girl navigating life in a new country, had to find her footing in a world that was very different from the one she had been born into. From a young age, Letitia was drawn to performance. She found in acting a way of expressing emotions and experiences that she could not always articulate in ordinary life. She attended the Identity School of Acting in London, which is an institution specifically founded to train young Black British talent and give performers from underrepresented backgrounds the tools and the opportunities they needed to build real careers. The school proved to be a transformative environment for her. She developed her craft seriously and began to build the technical and emotional range that would later define her performances on screen. Her career began with small but notable roles in British television. She appeared in the British series Top Boy, a gritty and highly respected drama about life on a London council estate, as well as in the series Chasing Shadows and Humans. She also appeared in the Black Mirror episode Nosedive, one of the most critically discussed episodes of that anthology series, in which she played a character navigating a dystopian world obsessed with social media ratings. That performance caught significant attention and demonstrated that Letitia possessed a depth and range well beyond her years. The role that changed everything came in 2018 when she was cast as Shuri in Marvel Studios' Black Panther. The character of Shuri, T'Challa's younger sister and the technological genius behind Wakanda's advanced innovations, immediately connected with audiences in a way that no one could have fully anticipated. Letitia brought an irresistible energy to the role, balancing Shuri's sharp intellect and playful humor with genuine warmth and emotional presence. She was nominated for a BAFTA Rising Star Award following the film's release, and she became one of the most beloved new additions to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She went on to reprise the role in Avengers, Infinity War and Avengers, Endgame, appearing in some of the biggest films ever made. But it was Black Panther, Wakanda Forever that truly tested her as an actress, because the film required her to carry the entire emotional weight of a story built around loss, grief, and personal transformation. With Chadwick Boseman gone, Letitia was not just playing a character. She was becoming the center of a franchise, the new Black Panther, and she did so while processing her own real grief over the loss of her friend and co-star. Her performance in the film is widely considered the finest of her career, a nuanced, raw, and deeply committed portrayal of a young woman falling apart and then putting herself back together on her own terms. Her personal life has also drawn attention over the years. She has spoken openly about going through a period of depression and anxiety as a young woman, and about how her Christian faith became a central anchor in her life during that difficult time. She has been candid in interviews about stepping away from acting briefly when her mental health was struggling, and about how she found her way back through both her faith and her renewed sense of purpose. Her openness about these experiences has made her a particularly relatable and admired figure among young fans around the world. Angela Evelyn Bassett was born on August 16, 1958, in New York City, in the Harlem neighborhood. Her early childhood was shaped by significant instability. Her parents separated when she was very young, and her mother, who struggled to provide consistent care during this period, eventually made the difficult decision to have Angela and her sister placed in foster care. The sisters were taken. Her early career was built in theater and television, with small roles that slowly gave way to larger opportunities. She appeared in various television productions through the 1980s before landing a role in the 1991 John Singleton film Boys in the Hood, which gave her a foothold in Hollywood. But the role that truly launched her into the first rank of American actresses came in 1993, when what followed was a career of remarkable range and longevity. She appeared in Waiting to Exhale in 1995, an enormously successful and culturally significant film about Black women's friendship and resilience, for which she received massive critical acclaim. She starred in How Stella Got Her Groove back in 1998, continuing her streak of leading roles in films that centered on the experiences of Black women in America. She appeared in Strange Days, Supernova, and various other films throughout the 1990s and 2000s, always bringing an unmistakable authority and command to whatever she took on. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Angela was cast as Queen Ramonda in Black Panther, the regal, strong, and deeply loving mother of T'Challa and Shuri. She reprised the role in several MCU projects before Black Panther. Wakanda Forever gave her the most substantial and emotionally demanding version of the character. Her performance in that film as a queen grieving her son while holding her nation together earned her an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actress, making her the first actor in a Marvel superhero film ever to receive an Oscar nomination for their performance. While she did not win the award, the nomination itself was a historic milestone and a recognition of the extraordinary level of craft she brought to a genre that is not always taken seriously by award bodies. Angela has been married to actor Courtney B. Vance since 1997, and the two are widely regarded as one of Hollywood's most stable and deeply committed couples. They have twins together, a son named Slater and a daughter named Bronwyn, born in 2006. She has spoken beautifully over the years about the importance of family, faith, and maintaining a sense of groundedness in an industry that can be disorienting and unstable. Now in her mid-60s, Angela Bassett remains one of the most commanding and respected presences in American entertainment, with a career that spans more than 4 decades and shows no signs of slowing down. Tenoch Huerta Mejia. Tenoch Huerta Mejia was born on January 29, 1981, in Ecatepec, Morelos, a municipality in the state of Mexico that sits on the outskirts of Mexico City. His upbringing was working class and marked by the kind of economic hardship that shapes a person deeply. He grew up in a neighborhood where opportunities were limited and where the path forward required tremendous determination and willingness to work against significant social and systemic obstacles. Tenoch is of indigenous and Afro-Mexican heritage, and throughout his life and career he has been openly and passionately vocal about the racism and colorism that exists within Mexican society and within the Mexican entertainment industry specifically. From an early age, Tenoch was drawn to performance. He studied acting formally and worked hard to build a career in Mexican film and television during a time when leading roles for dark-skinned actors of indigenous heritage were extremely limited. The entertainment industry in Mexico, like in many countries, has historically shown a strong preference for lighter-skinned actors in leading roles, and Tenoch was repeatedly confronted with this bias throughout the early years of his career. Rather than accepting this reality quietly, he chose to speak about it publicly and insistently, becoming one of the most outspoken advocates for racial equality and indigenous representation in Mexican entertainment and culture. His career in Mexican cinema built steadily through the 2000s and 2010s. He appeared in a wide range of films and television productions, earning respect within the industry for his intensity, his commitment, and the unmistakable authenticity he brought to every character he played. He is perhaps best known in the Spanish-language world for his work in the Netflix series Narcos, Mexico, in which he played Rafael Caro Quintero, one of the founders of the Guadalajara cartel. His performance in that series brought him to the attention of international audiences for the first time and demonstrated the kind of complex, morally layered characterization that he is capable of delivering. The announcement that he had been cast as Namor in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever sent shockwaves through both the Marvel fan community and the broader world of cinema. For Tenoch, the casting was deeply personal and profoundly meaningful. Namor in the MCU is not the Atlantean of the original Marvel comics, but has been reimagined as a Mayan-inspired leader, the ruler of Tenoch, an underwater civilization with deep roots in ancient Mesoamerican culture. For a man who has spent his entire career fighting for the representation of indigenous Mexican and Latin American culture in mainstream media, being given the opportunity to play this character in one of the biggest film franchises in history was an almost overwhelming honor and responsibility. He threw himself into the research and preparation for the role with extraordinary dedication. He worked extensively with Mayan historians and cultural consultants to ensure that his portrayal of Namor and the world of Tenoch was authentic, respectful, and genuinely reflective of the culture it was drawing from. His performance in the film is one of the most discussed and praised aspects of Wakanda Forever, with many critics and audiences agreeing that he brought a rare combination of physical power, intellectual depth, and emotional complexity to the role of the antagonist. Tenoch Huerta is a man who has never allowed his success to separate him from his roots or from his convictions. He continues to speak openly about racism, colonial history, and the importance of storytelling that centers people who have historically been pushed to the margins. His entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe represents not just a personal achievement, but a cultural one, a signal that the stories of indigenous and Latin American peoples have a place in the largest and most visible entertainment franchise in the world. Lupita Nyong'o. Lupita Amandi Nyong'o was born on March 1, 1983, in Mexico City, Mexico, where her father, Peter Anyang Nyong'o, was working as a professor. Her family is Kenyan, of the Luo ethnic group, and they returned to Kenya when Lupita was still a young child, settling in Kisumu on the shores of Lake Victoria. She grew up primarily in Kenya, though her life has always been marked by a sense of international movement and multiple cultural identities. From an early age, Lupita was surrounded by education and public service. Her father went on to become a prominent Kenyan politician and academic, serving as a senator and cabinet minister, and the family was deeply embedded in the intellectual and civic life of Kenya. Lupita attended the Ruzinga School and later St. Mary's School in Nairobi before pursuing her higher education abroad. She studied film and theater at Hampshire College in Massachusetts in the United States, and later earned her Master of Fine Arts in Acting from the prestigious Yale School of Drama, the same institution that produced Angela Bassett among many other distinguished performers. Her professional career began in Kenya and expanded through theater and small film productions. She worked behind the camera as well as in front of it, writing, directing, and producing short films and documentary work during her early career. She developed a deep understanding of storytelling from multiple angles, not just as a performer but as a creator, and that perspective has informed everything she has done since. The moment that made Lupita Nyong'o a global figure came in 2013 when she was cast in Steve McQueen's devastating historical drama 12 Years a Slave. In her film debut in a major Hollywood production, she played Patsy, an enslaved woman on a Louisiana plantation whose suffering is at the center of the film's most harrowing sequences. The performance she delivered was so raw, so completely committed, and so deeply human that it silenced audiences and critics alike. She won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actress for the role, becoming only the 9th black actress in history to win an acting Oscar. She also won the Screen Actors Guild Award and numerous other honors, and she delivered what remains one of the most gracious and beautifully spoken acceptance speeches in Oscar history. What followed was a career of remarkable versatility and global reach. She joined the Star Wars franchise as Maz Kanata in The Force Awakens in 2015, bringing a beloved new character to life through voice and motion capture performance. She appeared in the horror film Us in 2019, directed by Jordan Peele, in a dual role that required her to play both a loving mother and a terrifying doppelganger, a performance widely considered one of the best horror performances in recent cinema. She was cast as Nakia in the original Black Panther in 2018 and reprised the role in Wakanda Forever, in which her character's connection to T'Challa is revealed to have produced a child who carries his name and his legacy. Beyond her acting, Lupita Nyong'o has become one of the most prominent and influential voices in the global conversation about beauty standards, representation, and the way dark-skinned women are treated both within the entertainment industry and in society at large. Her speech at Essence magazine in 2014, in which she spoke with extraordinary vulnerability and eloquence about her childhood struggles with her dark skin and how she learned to embrace her own beauty, became one of the most widely shared and deeply felt pieces of public speaking in recent memory. She has used her platform consistently to advocate for diversity, inclusion, and the visibility of African and Black stories on screen and in literature. She is also the author of a children's book called Sulwe, published in 2019, which deals with themes of skin color, self-acceptance, and inner beauty, and has become a beloved and important book for children around the world. Denai Gurira. Denai Jekisai Gurira was born on February 14, 1978, in Grinnell, Iowa, in the United States, to Zimbabwean parents who were in America temporarily while her father completed his doctorate degree. When Denai was 5 years old, the family returned to Zimbabwe, where she was raised in the city of Harare. She grew up in Zimbabwe during a complex and turbulent period in that country's history, and the experience of living in a post-colonial African nation shaped her worldview profoundly and became the foundation for much of her artistic work as both a writer and a performer. She returned to the United States for her higher education, attending Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she studied psychology. She then pursued her Master of Fine Arts in Acting from New York University's Tisch School of the Arts, one of the most prestigious performing arts programs in the country. At Tisch, she not only deepened her craft as an actress but also began to develop her extraordinary talents as a playwright, a dimension of her artistic life that many people outside the theater world are not fully aware of. Denai Gurira is not just an actress. She is one of the most significant and celebrated playwrights working in the American theater today. Her plays center on the experiences of African women and explore themes of identity, war, survival, sexuality, and the complex legacies of colonialism and violence. Her play Eclipsed, which tells the story of women held captive by a Liberian warlord during the Second Liberian Civil War, made it to Broadway in 2016, where it became a historic production. The play was notable not only for its powerful subject matter but for the fact that every actress in the cast was a Black woman, and the entire creative team was composed of Black artists, an extraordinary and celebrated milestone in Broadway history. Denai herself starred in the Broadway production alongside Lupita Nyong'o, making their later work together in the Black Panther franchise a reunion of two collaborators with deep artistic roots. Her television career exploded with her casting as Michonne in The Walking Dead, the AMC zombie drama that became one of the most watched television series in American history. Michonne, a fearless and fiercely independent survivor who wields a katana with devastating skill, became one of the most iconic characters of the entire series. Denai played the role for 9 seasons, from 2012 to 2021, and brought a combination of physical intensity and unexpected emotional vulnerability to a character who could easily have been written as only a warrior. Her role as Okoye, the general of the Dora Milaje in the Black Panther films, brought her to a global superhero audience and cemented her status as one of the most commanding physical presences in contemporary cinema. The character of Okoye is deeply aligned with Denai's own values, a woman of extraordinary strength and discipline whose ultimate loyalty is to the principles she believes in rather than simply to the people in power. In Wakanda Forever, Okoye's arc is one of the film's most emotionally resonant, as she loses her title, confronts her failure, and must find a new path forward without the identity that has defined her entire life. Winston Duke. Winston Duke was born on November 15, 1986, in Argyll, a village on the island of Tobago in the nation of Trinidad and Tobago. He grew up in Tobago in a warm and close-knit community, and describes his childhood there as deeply formative, full of the kind of communal life and cultural richness that the islands of the Caribbean are known for. When he was 9 years old, his family immigrated to the United States, settling in Brooklyn, New York, and Winston had to navigate the enormous shift from a small Caribbean island community to one of the largest and most complex cities in the world. He found his way through that transition in part through education and in part through the discovery of theater. He attended the University of Buffalo, where he studied and fell in love with performance, before earning his Master of Fine Arts in Acting from the Yale School of Drama. Yale became a turning point in his life, connecting him to a community of serious, committed artists and giving him the rigorous training that professional theater and screen acting demand. His early career was built through stage work and small television appearances. He appeared in various American television series in supporting roles, working steadily and building his craft. But his trajectory changed completely when he was cast as M'Baku, the leader of the Jabari tribe, in the original Black Panther. M'Baku arrives in that film as what appears to be a villainous figure, a fierce and imposing warrior who challenges T'Challa's right to the throne in ritual combat. But as the story unfolds, M'Baku reveals himself to be a man of deep principle, unexpected humor, and genuine wisdom. Winston Duke's physical stature, his natural charisma, and his talent for finding humor and humanity within powerful characters made M'Baku an instant fan favorite. He went on to star in Jordan Peele's Us in 2019, playing the patriarch of a family terrorized by mysterious doppelgangers. He appeared in Avengers, Infinity War and Avengers, Endgame, and continued to build his film career with various projects. In Wakanda Forever, M'Baku's role is significantly expanded, and Winston brings a beautiful blend of strength and emotional intelligence to a character who becomes one of the moral compasses of the film, the person who tries to pull Shuri back from the edge of vengeance when almost no one else can reach her. Winston Duke is also known for being a deeply thoughtful and intellectually engaged public figure. He speaks and writes about masculinity, about what it means to be a large black man in America and in Hollywood, about the importance of vulnerability, and about the responsibility that comes with the kind of platform his success has given him. He is widely admired not just for his acting but for the seriousness and care he brings to his public presence. Martin Freeman. Martin John Freeman was born on September 8, 1971, in Aldershot, Hampshire, in England. His childhood was shaped early by loss. His father died of a heart attack when Martin was only 10 years old, and the experience of growing up without his father left a lasting mark on him. He was raised by his mother, and found his way toward performance as a young man, studying at the Central School of Speech and Drama in London, one of the most respected performing arts conservatories in the United Kingdom. His early career was built entirely in British theatre and television, and for years he was a working actor in the solid middle of the British entertainment landscape, known and respected within the industry but not yet widely famous. That changed dramatically in 2001 when he was cast as Tim Canterbury in the original British version of The Office, created by Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant. The Office became one of the most influential television comedies ever made, and Martin's performance as Tim, the quietly sardonic and romantically hopeful paper salesman, was the emotional heart of the entire series. His ability to find genuine feeling within a comedy of awkwardness and cringe made him one of the most loved actors in British television. From there, his career expanded significantly. He was cast as Arthur Dent in the 2005 film adaptation of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and then took on the role that would define the first phase of his international fame, Bilbo Baggins in Peter Jackson's The Hobbit trilogy. Playing the gentle, reluctant hero of Tolkien's beloved story required Martin to anchor a series of enormous fantasy epics, and he brought warmth, humor, and genuine heart to the role across all three films. His other defining role came in the BBC series Sherlock, in which he played Dr. John Watson opposite Benedict Cumberbatch's Sherlock Holmes. The series became a global phenomenon, and Martin's portrayal of Watson as a deeply capable, emotionally complex, and quietly heroic figure was a significant departure from the traditional sidekick interpretation of the character. The role earned him a BAFTA Award for Best Supporting Actor. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Martin plays Everett Ross, a CIA agent who becomes entangled with Wakanda and gradually shifts from a figure of institutional authority to a genuine ally. The character requires Martin to play in registers very different from the comedy and fantasy he is known for, and he brings a grounded, slightly bumbling but ultimately decent quality to Ross that fits perfectly within the world of Wakanda. Dominique Thorne. Dominique Thorne was born on May 9, 1999, in New York. She grew up in a family that valued education and creativity, and from a young age she showed a strong inclination toward performance and the arts. She studied at Princeton University, one of the most academically rigorous institutions in the world, graduating with a degree that reflected her serious intellectual commitment alongside her creative ambitions. Her screen career began with a notable role in Barry Jenkins' If Beale Street Could Talk in 2018, an adaptation of James Baldwin's novel that is widely considered one of the finest American films of recent decades. Appearing in a Barry Jenkins film so early in her career was an extraordinary statement of intent, and her performance demonstrated a maturity and emotional intelligence well beyond her years. Her casting as Riri Williams in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever marked her entry into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and her character, a genius MIT engineering student who builds her own Iron Man-style suit, is significant enough to have her own Disney Plus series, Ironheart, continuing her story. Dominique brings an infectious energy and genuine technical believability to a character who must be understood as extraordinary in both intelligence and spirit. Michaela Seal. Michaela Uraba Bokai Collinson, known professionally as Michaela Seal, was born on October 1, 1987, in London, England, to Ghanaian parents. She grew up in Bethnal Green in East London, in a working-class environment where opportunities for a career in entertainment were not self-evident. Her path to performance came through the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, one of the most prestigious conservatories in the United Kingdom, where she was one of the very few black students in her program. The experience of being so visibly different in that environment, of having her identity and her voice be something that did not fit the mold the institution was accustomed to, became central to the kind of storytelling she was determined to pursue. She first came to wide public attention through her one-woman show Chewing Gum Dreams, which she wrote and performed at the National Theatre in London before adapting it into the television series Chewing Gum for Channel 4. The series, which she created, wrote, and starred in, was a groundbreaking comedy about a young black woman from a deeply religious background navigating her sexuality and identity in contemporary London. It won her a BAFTA Award for Best Female Comedy Performance, and established her as one of the most exciting creative voices in British television. Her next project, I May Destroy You, which she created, wrote, directed, and starred in for the BBC and HBO, is widely considered one of the greatest television works of the 21st century. The series dealt with sexual assault, consent, memory, and trauma with a level of honesty, artistic courage, and structural innovation that left critics and audiences genuinely shaken. It drew heavily from her own experiences of surviving a sexual assault, and the process of making it was both an act of artistic creation and a deeply personal reckoning. The series earned nominations across every major television award and won Michaela the BAFTA Award for Best Writer. Her decision not to sell the rights to the show to any streaming service despite enormous offers, because she wanted to retain control of her work and her story, became a widely discussed statement about the rights of creative artists in the modern entertainment landscape. Her role as Annika in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever represents her entry into the superhero genre, and she brings to it the same fierce intelligence and grounded presence that characterizes everything she does. Mabel Cadena. Mabel Cadena is a Mexican actress born on February 23, 1990, in Mexicali, Baja California, Mexico. She grew up in a border region with a distinctive cultural identity shaped by its proximity to the United States and its deep roots in Mexican culture. She pursued acting with serious commitment and built her career primarily in Mexican film and television, earning recognition and respect within the industry for her talent and her presence. She is known in Mexico for her work in various television telenovelas and series, and for her stage work. Her casting as Namor in Black Panther, Wakanda Forever brought her to international attention for the first time. Namor is Namor's fiercely loyal cousin and one of Talokan's most powerful warriors, and Mabel brings a ferocious and magnetic energy to the role that left audiences wanting to see much more of the character. Her casting alongside Tenoch Huerta in representing Mesoamerican culture within the MCU was widely celebrated as a meaningful and overdue step toward Latin American representation in mainstream superhero cinema. Florence Kasumba. Florence Kasumba was born on September 28, 1976, in Kampala, Uganda. Her family relocated to Germany when she was a child, and she grew up in Germany, building her life and her career within the German and European cultural landscape. She studied performing arts and built a career that spanned theater, film, and television across Europe before her path led her to Hollywood. She is known in Germany for her extensive stage work and for her television appearances in German productions. Her international profile rose significantly when she was cast as Ao, a senior member of the Dora Milaje, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. She first appeared as Ao in Captain America: Civil War and has returned to the role in multiple MCU projects, including Black Panther, Avengers, Infinity War, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, and Ironheart. Florence brings an extraordinary physical grace and quiet, commanding authority to a character who speaks volumes through presence and action rather than through words. She is a woman who has navigated multiple countries, multiple languages, and multiple cultural contexts throughout her life and career, and that breadth of experience gives her a worldly depth that enriches everything she brings to the screen. Julia Louis-Dreyfus. Julia Scarlett Elizabeth Louis-Dreyfus was born on January 13, 1961, in New York City, into a life of considerable privilege. Her father, Gerard Louis-Dreyfus, was a wealthy businessman and heir to a major commodities trading empire. Growing up in affluence, Julia attended the Holton Arms School in Bethesda, Maryland, before going on to Northwestern University in Illinois, where she studied theater. During her time at Northwestern, she became part of a comedy group that included future Saturday Night Live cast members, and it was clear from early on that comedy was her natural home. She was cast as a cast member on Saturday Night Live while she was still in college, joining the legendary sketch comedy show in 1982 at the age of just 21. Her time on SNL was formative but not immediately the breakthrough she would go on to achieve. The role that changed everything came in 1989 when she was cast as Elaine Benes in Seinfeld, the NBC sitcom that would go on to become one of the most beloved and influential television comedies in American history. Seinfeld ran for 9 seasons and made Julia a cultural icon. Elaine was a sharp, funny, neurotic, and deeply human character, and Julia's ability to do physical comedy while also grounding the character in genuine feeling made her performances some of the finest in the history of American sitcom television. What Julia then achieved after Seinfeld is perhaps even more remarkable than the show itself. She went on to win 6 Emmy Awards for her role as Selina Meyer in Veep, the HBO political satire that ran from 2012 to 2019. 6 consecutive Emmy Awards for the same role is a record in the history of American television, and it confirmed Julia not just as a talented actress but as one of the greatest comic performers of her generation. During the run of Veep, she was also diagnosed with breast cancer in 2017, an experience she faced publicly and with great courage. She completed treatment and returned to work, and her openness about the experience added another dimension to the enormous respect in which she is held. Her role as Valentina Allegra de Fontaine in the MCU, which she began in The Falcon and the Winter Soldier, is a departure from comedy into a more ambiguous, morally complex territory. Valentina is a shadowy, powerful figure whose ultimate agenda remains unclear, and Julia plays her with a delicious combination of charm, wit, and underlying menace. She continues to expand her MCU presence, and her addition to the franchise has been one of its most inspired casting decisions in recent years. The budget, making of, and funny behind-the-scenes moments of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. The budget and what it cost to make this movie. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever was one of the most expensive films ever produced at the time of its release, carrying a production budget of approximately $250 million. To put that number into perspective, the original Black Panther in 2018 was made on a similar budget, but Wakanda Forever was a significantly more complex and technically demanding production in almost every single way. The $250 million price tag made it the most expensive film ever made with a black lead actor at the time, surpassing the 2012 Will Smith film Men in Black 3, which had carried a production budget of $215 million. That $250 million did not appear on screen by accident. Every single dollar was pushed into the creative, technical, physical, and emotional scope of a production that was unlike anything Marvel Studios had attempted before. When you break down where the money actually went, the picture becomes clear very quickly. A massive portion of the budget was consumed by the visual effects work required to bring the underwater world of Tenoch to life. Creating an entirely new civilization beneath the ocean, complete with architecture, culture, bioluminescent lighting, the movement of water, the behavior of hair and clothing in aquatic environments, and the physical mechanics of characters swimming, flying, and fighting in conditions that defy ordinary human physics, required hundreds of artists, animators, and visual effects technicians working around the clock for months. The visual effects team had to essentially invent new ways of approaching underwater imagery for this production, because what they were being asked to create had never been done at this scale before. The production was based primarily at Trillis Studios in Atlanta, Georgia, which is one of the largest and most technologically advanced film production facilities in the United States. Trilith became the home base for the throne room sets, Shuri's lab, the ancestral plane sequences, and many of the interior Wakandan locations. For water tank sequences, including Namor's underwater kingdom and the massive ship battle sequences that formed the backbone of the film's climactic confrontation, the production moved to Mary Ross Waterfront Park in Brunswick, Georgia, where the scale and resources allowed for filming with genuinely massive sets partially submerged in real water. The production also traveled to Puerto Rico for ocean and coastal sequences, taking advantage of the island's extraordinary natural landscape to create some of the film's most visually breathtaking moments. Additionally, scenes set at MIT were filmed on location in Worcester and Cambridge, Massachusetts, grounding Riri Williams's story in the real geography of the American academic world. The budget also had to absorb the enormous cost of the costume and wardrobe department, led by the legendary Ruthie Carter, who had won an Academy Award for her costume work on the original Black Panther. For Wakanda Forever, Carter and her team had to design not just the continuation of Wakandan fashion, but an entirely new visual language for Tenoch, a civilization rooted in ancient Mayan culture. Every costume worn by the Talacano characters had to be designed, constructed, and then tested in water to see how it behaved when submerged, because a costume that looks extraordinary on dry land can look completely wrong when it is wet and floating in unpredictable ways. The budget for costumes alone ran into the tens of millions of dollars across the film's entire cast and the large number of background performers needed to populate both Wakanda and Tenoch. The musical score, composed by Ludwig Göransson, who had also scored the original Black Panther, represented another significant investment. Göransson crafted a score that blended traditional African musical instruments and composition with Mesoamerican musical traditions, creating an entirely new sonic world for Tenoch while also continuing the musical identity of Wakanda established in the first film. The film also featured the Rihanna song Lift Me Up, which was written specifically for the movie as a tribute to Chadwick Boseman, and was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Original Song. Commissioning and producing original music of this caliber adds considerably to the overall cost of a major production. The production's budget was also significantly impacted by the additional challenges created by the COVID-19 pandemic and by the serious on-set injury sustained by Letitia Wright. Wright was hurt during a stunt sequence in August 2021, while the film was shooting in Boston. The injury was serious enough that production had to be temporarily shut down entirely while she recovered. She flew back to London to heal, and the production was suspended for weeks. Marvel Studios had already pushed the film's release date back from its original July 2022 date to November 2022, partly in anticipation of various challenges, but the shutdown added further complications and costs to an already demanding production schedule. Every day that a production of this scale is not shooting costs an enormous amount of money, as the crew, the equipment, and the facilities all continue to generate expenses even when the cameras are not rolling. Despite all of these challenges, the film went on to gross $859.2 million worldwide against its $250 million budget, earning a solid profit. Deadline reported that after all costs including production, promotion, talent participations, and other expenses were factored in, the film generated approximately $259 million in profit, confirming that even in a challenging post-pandemic theatrical landscape, a well-made Marvel production with genuine emotional resonance could still perform at a very high level. The extraordinary challenge of going underwater, where the funny begins. Dry for wet, pretending to be underwater while standing in a studio. Despite all of the actual underwater filming they did, the production ultimately shot most of the film's underwater footage using a technique called dry for wet, which is exactly what it sounds like. Filming scenes on a dry set or against a blue screen while creating the visual illusion of being underwater through post-production effects. This technique has been used in filmmaking for many years, but the scale at which Wakanda Forever employed it was unprecedented. The visual effects supervisor Jeffrey Bauman acknowledged that a significant amount of real underwater footage was shot first, and that this early wet filming was enormously valuable not because it was ultimately used in the film, but because it taught the camera team and the actors what underwater movement actually looked and felt like. That physical and visual knowledge was then carried into the dry for wet process, making the simulated underwater performances far more believable than they could ever have been if the actors had simply been asked to pretend without any direct experience to draw from. So in a sense, the production paid for months of actual underwater filming largely so that people would know how to pretend to be underwater on a dry stage. This is the kind of creative and financial logic that is utterly unique to big-budget cinema. When you stand back and look at the full picture of what it took to make Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, the combination of the budget, the technical ambition, the emotional demands, and the human comedy of the process creates something that is genuinely extraordinary. You had a director who had to learn to swim to make his own movie. You had the Queen of Wakanda worrying about her hair getting wet. You had the King of the Ocean who had technically never drowned. You had a grass skirt that refused to behave. You had ankle wings that started life as cartoon helicopters. You had a cast of some of the finest actors in the world doing their finest work while wearing skull caps and pretending to be underwater on a dry studio floor in Georgia. And underneath all of it, running through every funny story and every absurd behind-the-scenes moment, was the deep, serious, and utterly human purpose of a group of people determined to honor the memory of a man they loved and to tell a story worthy of everything he represented. That is what $250 million, months of swimming lessons, floating grass skirts, and miniature CG helicopters on digital ankles adds up to when it is all said and done. It adds up to Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. The cultural and historical details of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Introduction: a film built on real history. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever is far more than a superhero sequel. It is a film that was constructed with extraordinary deliberateness on a foundation of real history, real cultures, real languages, real mythologies, and real political legacies that span centuries. From the first frame to the final credits, nearly every visual choice, every character name, every language spoken, every costume worn, every god invoked, and every civilization depicted draws from something that actually existed or continues to exist in the real world. The filmmakers, led by Coogler, did not create their fictional worlds in a vacuum. They studied, consulted, researched, and collaborated with historians, cultural experts, linguists, and members of the communities they were drawing from in order to build something that honored rather than exploited the traditions it was inspired by. To fully understand and appreciate what this film is doing requires going beneath the surface of the superhero spectacle and engaging with the layers of history, culture, and political meaning that give the story its genuine power and its lasting resonance. What follows is a deep and detailed exploration of every major cultural and historical thread woven into the fabric of this extraordinary film. Afrofuturism, the philosophical backbone of Wakanda. To understand the cultural significance of the Black Panther franchise, including Wakanda Forever, you must first understand the concept of Afrofuturism, because it is the philosophical and aesthetic foundation upon which everything in Wakanda is built. Afrofuturism is a cultural and artistic movement that was formally named in 1994, though its roots stretch back much further into the creative traditions of the African diaspora. At its core, Afrofuturism is the intersection of African and diasporic identity with science fiction, technology, speculative imagination, and visions of the future. It is not simply science fiction made by Black people. It is something more specific and more politically charged than that. Afrofuturism begins from the recognition that the history of African people has been one of radical erasure, in which Afrofuturism responds to this erasure not with despair but with imagination. It asks the question, what might the world look like if that erasure had never happened? What might African civilizations have become if they had been allowed to develop without the interruption of colonialism? What does a future look like in which Black people are not at the margins of technological and intellectual progress but at its very center? Afrofuturist artists, musicians, writers, and filmmakers mine the past, recover suppressed knowledge, and project it forward into visions of possibility. Musicians like Sunare, Parliament Funkadelic, and Janelle Monáe, writers like Octavia Butler, and filmmakers like Coogler are all working within this tradition. Wakanda is the purest cinematic expression of Afrofuturist imagination. It is an African nation that was never colonized, never enslaved, never subjected to the dehumanizing processes that defined the relationship between Africa and Europe for centuries. Because it was never colonized, it was never forced to abandon its traditions, never had its resources extracted by outside powers, never had its people displaced or its culture suppressed. And because it was never colonized, it developed freely, and the result is the most technologically advanced nation on Earth. The political message embedded in that premise is profound and radical. It suggests that the so-called underdevelopment of Africa is not a natural condition but a manufactured one, created by colonialism, and that the true potential of African civilization, had it been allowed to develop on its own terms, is limitless. Wakanda is what Africa might have been. And for Black audiences around the world, that vision is not just entertainment. It is a form of restoration, a recovery of a dignity and a grandeur that history tried to take away. In Wakanda Forever, this Afrofuturist vision deepens and complicates itself by introducing a second hidden civilization, Tenoch, which operates according to the same basic principle but with a crucial difference. Tenoch was not untouched by colonialism. It was created because of colonialism. Its existence is the direct result of a group of indigenous Mesoamerican people fleeing the violence of Spanish conquistadors, and that origin gives the film an additional layer of historical weight and moral complexity that elevates it far beyond the typical superhero narrative. The Mayan civilization, the heart of Tenoch. The civilization of Tenoch, its people, its language, its architecture, its spiritual practices, and its very reason for existing, are rooted primarily in the historical reality of the Mayan civilization, one of the greatest and most sophisticated civilizations in human history. The ancient Maya were not a single nation but a collection of powerful city-states spread across what is today southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, and El Salvador. At the height of their civilization, between roughly 250 C and 900 C, the Maya built extraordinary cities filled with towering stone pyramids, elaborate palaces, intricate water management systems, and sophisticated astronomical observatories. Their achievements in mathematics were centuries ahead of anything being produced in Europe at the same time. The Maya independently developed the concept of zero, a mathematical innovation that is foundational to virtually all advanced mathematics and computing. Their calendar system was extraordinarily precise, reflecting a deep understanding of astronomical cycles that allowed them to predict solar eclipses, the movements of Venus, and other celestial events with remarkable accuracy. The Maya were also masters of writing. The Mayan script is a fully developed logosyllabic writing system, meaning it uses combinations of symbols to represent both whole words and syllable sounds. It is one of only a handful of fully independent writing systems ever developed in human history. The Maya wrote on bark paper codices, on stone stelae, on pottery, and on the walls of their buildings, recording their history, their mythology, their astronomical observations, and their religious practices. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they systematically destroyed most of these written records, burning thousands of Mayan books in what historians now recognize as one of the great acts of cultural vandalism in history. The loss of this knowledge is incalculable. The Spanish conquest of the Yucatan Peninsula, which is the specific region of Mayan culture most directly referenced in Wakanda Forever, began in earnest in the early 16th century. The conquistadors brought with them not only weapons and military force but also diseases to which the indigenous population had no immunity. Smallpox, measles, typhus, and other European illnesses spread through Mayan communities with catastrophic speed, killing enormous proportions of the population in a matter of years. Some historians estimate that disease alone killed between 50 and 90% of the indigenous population of the Americas within a century of European contact. This was not simply a natural disaster. It was the biological dimension of a process of conquest and colonization that sought to eliminate or subjugate the peoples of the Americas and extract their resources for European benefit. It is this history, the history of a brilliant civilization confronting existential destruction through both violence and disease, that forms the foundation of Tenoch's origin story in the film. When the film shows Namor's mother's people being devastated by smallpox brought by colonizers and then discovering a vibranium-infused plant beneath the water that transforms them into underwater beings, it is drawing a direct line from the real historical catastrophe of the Spanish conquest to the fictional world of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Tenoch is what the Mayan civilization might have become if it had found a way to escape the destruction of colonialism entirely, by going somewhere the colonizers could not follow, beneath the ocean. The name Tenoch itself is a linguistic fusion of historical significance. It derives from Tenoch, which is the paradise of the Aztec rain god Tlaloc, a divine realm associated with water, abundance, and the afterlife of those who drowned. When adapted into the Mayan linguistic framework, this concept becomes Tenoch, blending Aztec cosmology with Mayan language in a way that reflects the broader Mesoamerican cultural region from which the civilization draws. Some historians and cultural commentators noted that this blending of Aztec and Mayan elements, while understandable from a filmmaking perspective, flattens some of the real distinctions between those two cultures, which were related but distinct civilizations with their own specific identities. This is a fair critique and one that the filmmakers themselves acknowledged, noting that they were making a superhero film rather than a documentary, and that their primary goal was to honor the spirit and grandeur of Mesoamerican culture rather than to provide a precise academic reconstruction of any single civilization. The Mayan language on screen, a historic moment. One of the most culturally significant decisions made by Ryan Coogler and the production team was the choice to have the people of Tenoch speak actual Yucatec Mayan, a real indigenous language that is today spoken by more than 800,000 people primarily in the Yucatan region of Mexico and in parts of Guatemala and Belize. Yucatec Mayan is one of 69 languages within the broader Mayan language family, and it is one of the most widely spoken indigenous languages in the Americas. For centuries, indigenous languages like Yucatec Mayan were actively suppressed by colonial authorities, who sought to impose Spanish as the only legitimate language of culture and civilization in Latin America. Indigenous people were punished for speaking their own languages in schools and public spaces. The deliberate suppression of indigenous languages was part of a broader project of cultural erasure that sought to make indigenous people forget who they were and where they came from. The survival of Yucatec Mayan into the 21st century is itself a testament to the resilience and determination of the communities that kept it alive. Tenoch Huerta, who plays Namor, learned to speak Yucatec Mayan specifically for his role, an undertaking that required months of study and practice. This was particularly challenging for Huerta, who was simultaneously working on learning English for his international interviews and press obligations. He described studying English for an hour and then Mayan for an hour, working with a language coach to nail the pronunciation and memorize his dialogue. The decision to have Namor and the people of Tenoch actually speak Mayan rather than simply gesturing at it decoratively was enormously meaningful to members of the Mayan community around the world. For people who had spent their lives watching Hollywood films in which their cultures were either absent, misrepresented, or reduced to stereotypes, hearing their ancestral language spoken by a major character in the biggest entertainment franchise in the world was a genuinely historic and deeply emotional experience. The film even includes a Yucatec Mayan language rap song in its end credits, a moment that scholar communities and language advocates pointed to as a remarkable act of cultural affirmation within a mainstream Hollywood production. Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god. When Baki describes Namor to the warriors of Wakanda, he does not call him a king or a general. He calls him Kukulkan, the feathered serpent god. This name is not invented for the film. Kukulkan, or Kukulkan in the Mayan language, is one of the most important and widely revered deities in Mesoamerican mythology. The feathered serpent deity appears across multiple Mesoamerican cultures under different names. In Aztec mythology, the same being is known as Quetzalcoatl, one of the most important gods in the entire Aztec pantheon. In Mayan cosmology, Kukulkan is similarly a deity of supreme importance, associated with wind, water, the sky, and the cycle of life and death. The famous pyramid at Chichen Itza in the Yucatan, known as El Castillo, is a temple dedicated to Kukulkan. Twice a year, at the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun creates a shadow on the pyramid steps that forms the shape of a serpent descending to earth, a visual miracle of astronomical and architectural precision that reflects the extraordinary sophistication of Mayan science and spirituality. By naming Namor after Kukulkan, the film is connecting him not just to Mayan mythology in a general sense but to one of its most specific and powerful divine figures, a god of the sky and water who commands both elemental realms. This is entirely appropriate for a character who can fly with his ankle wings and rule the ocean with absolute authority. Namor is framed not merely as a king but as a living deity, a being who exists at the intersection of the human and the divine in exactly the way that the feathered serpent of Mesoamerican tradition does. Namor's feathered headdress, designed by Ruth E. Carter and her team after extensive research into Mesoamerican art and historical records, is a direct visual reference to the iconography of Kukulkan and Quetzalcoatl as they appear in ancient Mayan and Aztec codices and sculpture. The headdress as a symbol of power, spiritual authority, and connection to the divine is one of the most consistent and recognizable elements of Mesoamerican visual culture, and its presence in Namor's design roots him visually and spiritually in the civilization he represents. For the Talakano, Carter and her team conducted months of research into Mesoamerican history, studying ancient Mayan vases, sculptures, wall paintings, and architectural details that documented the clothing, jewelry, and ceremonial objects worn by Mayan nobles, warriors, and priests. They worked directly with Mayan historians and cultural consultants to ensure that what they were creating was informed by genuine knowledge rather than superficial impression. The result was a visual language for Tolokan that blended historical accuracy with the fantastical demands of an underwater civilization. The materials used in Tolokan's costumes reflect the environment in which its people live. Carter incorporated lionfish spines, shark bones, fish scales, jade, kelp, and other aquatic and natural elements into the headdresses and armor of the Talakano warriors. When the warriors fight on the surface, they must wear face masks filled with water to breathe, and their skin takes on a deep blue tone. Carter used greens and browns in the battle costumes to create a striking visual contrast with the blue skin, making the warriors immediately recognizable and visually distinctive even in the darkly lit underwater battle sequences. Namor's own costumes are among the most elaborate and historically referenced in the film. His septum piercing, which is a detail that many audience members might overlook, is a direct reference to Mayan cultural practice, in which septum piercings frequently represented connections to water and sun gods and were associated with fierce spiritual authority. His headdress incorporates the feathers that connect him to Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity. Every piece of his presentation was designed with a specific cultural reference in mind. For Wakanda's costumes in the sequel, Carter deepened and expanded the Pan-African vision she had established in the first film. The original Black Panther drew from the visual traditions of dozens of African cultures, including the Zulu, Maasai, Nebali, Dogon, Tuareg, and Himba peoples, blending them into a unified Wakandan aesthetic that felt both specific and expansive. Wakanda Forever continued this tradition, adding further layers of detail and refinement. The funeral and mourning costumes in particular, the white garments worn by the people of Wakanda as they grieve their king, draw from specific African mourning traditions in which white, rather than the Western convention of black, is the color of death and mourning. The film's opening funeral sequence, with its elaborate and visually beautiful mourning dress, is a direct honoring of these African traditions and their specific relationship to grief, ceremony, and the spiritual dimension of death. The architecture and production design of Tolokan. Production designer Hannah Beachler, who had won the Academy Award for her production design work on the original Black Panther, spent approximately 2 years building the world of Tolokan from the ground up. Working alongside Coogler, Carter, and a team of Mayan historians and cultural consultants assembled for the production, Beachler created a visual architecture for Tolokan that drew from Mayan architectural traditions while imagining how those traditions might have evolved in an underwater environment over the course of 5 centuries. The walls of Tolokan are covered in hieroglyphics and painted murals that reference actual Aztec and Mayan iconography, including depictions of deities, historical events, and spiritual narratives drawn from pre-Columbian tradition. The use of jade as a primary architectural and decorative material is historically significant, as jade was considered by the Maya to be among the most sacred of all materials, associated with life, royalty, water, and maize, which was the foundation of Mayan agricultural civilization. The green luminescence that characterizes much of Tolkien's visual identity reflects both the jade of Mayan tradition and the natural bioluminescent quality of deep ocean environments. Beechler described the process of designing Tolkien as an act of imaginative archaeology, working backward from what the Mayan civilization had been at the height of its power, and then asking what it might have become had it continued to develop in isolation for 500 years, free from the interruption of conquest. The result is a civilization that feels simultaneously ancient and advanced, rooted in its historical origins but evolved in ways that reflect the specific challenges and possibilities of life beneath the ocean. Toussaint Louverture and Haiti, the anti-colonial thread. The name of Chala's secret son, revealed at the end of the film on a Haitian beach, is Toussaint. This is not a casual choice. Toussaint Louverture was one of the most extraordinary revolutionary figures in the history of the entire Western Hemisphere, and his story is directly relevant to every theme that runs through Wakanda Forever. Toussaint Louverture was born into slavery on the French colony of Saint-Domingue, which occupies the western portion of the island of Hispaniola and is today the nation of Haiti. He rose to become the most important leader of the Haitian Revolution, the only successful slave revolution in human history, in which enslaved people overthrew their French colonial masters and established an independent nation. The revolution, which ran from 1791 to 1804, was a watershed moment in world history, a demonstration that the enslaved people of the Americas could fight for and win their own freedom and sovereignty. Haiti, which was established as the first black republic in the world in 1804, has since been subjected to centuries of economic isolation, debt, and political interference from powerful nations that were deeply uncomfortable with the implications of its existence. France demanded that Haiti pay an enormous financial indemnity for the economic losses suffered by French slaveholders whose human property had freed themselves, a debt that Haiti continued to pay until 1947 and that contributed significantly to the economic difficulties the country has faced ever since. The United States occupied Haiti militarily from 1915 to 1934, and the country has faced ongoing political instability and poverty that reflect the long tail of its colonial history. The choice to name Chala's son Toussaint, to hide him in Haiti, and to reveal this in the final scene of the film is a deliberate and deeply layered political and historical statement. Nakia has been living in Haiti, raising her child in the first Black Republic, in the shadow of the man who proved that freedom from colonial domination was possible through organized resistance. Chala's son, the heir to the Black Panther legacy, carries the name of the greatest liberator in the history of the African diaspora. He also carries a Wakandan name, Chala, connecting the revolutionary tradition of Toussaint Louverture to the Afrofuturist vision of an Africa that was never colonized. The two names together, Toussaint and Chala, are not just a tribute to two different sets of ideas. They are a declaration that the legacies of real Black resistance and fictional Black greatness belong to the same continuum. Patrice Lumumba and Queen Ramonda. The film contains another deeply significant and largely overlooked historical reference embedded in the character of Queen Ramonda. The film indicates that Ramonda's family name is connected to Lumumba, a reference to Patrice Lumumba, the first democratically elected Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo following its independence from Belgium in 1960. Patrice Lumumba was a visionary and charismatic leader who dreamed of a truly independent Congo, free from foreign economic exploitation and political interference. His vision for Congo and for Africa was of a continent of sovereign nations that controlled their own resources and their own destinies. He was in power for only a matter of months before he was overthrown in a coup in September 1960. He was subsequently imprisoned, tortured, and murdered in January 1961, with the active involvement of the Belgian government and with the knowledge and complicity of the CIA and the American government, who feared that Lumumba's Pan-African nationalism might lead Congo toward the Soviet orbit during the Cold War. His murder was a catastrophic moment in African history, one that set the stage for decades of brutal authoritarian rule in Congo and for the continuing exploitation of the country's vast mineral wealth, including uranium, cobalt, and coltan, by foreign corporations and governments. Congo is, in many ways, the closest real-world parallel to the fictional Wakanda, an extraordinarily resource-rich nation whose people have been denied the benefits of their own wealth by a combination of colonial exploitation, imposed authoritarianism, and foreign interference. By connecting Rwanda's family name to Lumumba, the film is drawing a direct line between Wakanda's fictional struggle to protect its vibranium from exploitation by powerful external forces and Congo's very real historical experience of having its extraordinary mineral wealth used as a justification for foreign intervention and control. The film also shows CIA agents receiving confirmation that the American president has initiated plans to destabilize Wakanda, an echo of the real CIA's role in the destabilization and eventual murder of Patrice Lumumba. This is not an accidental parallel. Ryan Coogler and his collaborators placed these historical references deliberately, knowing that audience members who recognized them would understand that the film was not just telling a story about fictional kingdoms, but making a statement about the real history of powerful nations extracting resources from less powerful ones and removing leaders who stood in their way. The music, sounds of Africa and Mesoamerica. Composer Ludwig Göransson, who had won an Academy Award for his score for the original Black Panther, undertook a research journey of extraordinary depth and breadth to create the music of Wakanda Forever. Understanding that the film was now asking him to score not one but two distinct civilizations, each with its own cultural identity and emotional world, Göransson traveled extensively and consulted with musicians, ethnomusicologists, and cultural researchers from both Africa and Mexico. For the Wakandan musical world, Göransson built on the foundation he had established in the first film, which drew from the musical traditions of multiple African nations, incorporating the sounds of West African talking drums, Senegalese grat traditions, and other African musical forms into a contemporary cinematic score. The Senegalese singer Baba Maal, who had contributed to the first film's music, returned for Wakanda Forever, bringing his extraordinary vocal tradition to the film's most emotionally powerful moments, including the haunting opening funeral sequence. For Tenoch, Göransson faced a unique challenge, creating a musical identity for a civilization that had been sealed from the rest of the world for 5 centuries. He researched the musical instruments and traditions of the ancient Maya, recognizing that much of this musical heritage had been destroyed or suppressed during the colonial period. He incorporated indigenous flutes, seashell horns, shakers, and drums that reflected both the sonic world of pre-Columbian Mesoamerica and the aquatic environment of Tenoch. The result is a Talakano musical voice that feels genuinely ancient and genuinely different from anything else in the Marvel Cinematic Universe's musical landscape. The film also features the song Lift Me Up, written by Rihanna and composer Ludwig Göransson specifically as a tribute to Chadwick Boseman. Rihanna, who is herself from Barbados and carries her own Caribbean and African diasporic heritage, had been in a period of public retirement from music while focused on her Fenty Beauty and Savage X Fenty business ventures. Her decision to return to music specifically for this tribute was widely seen as an act of profound respect for Boseman's legacy and for the cultural significance of the Black Panther franchise. Colonialism as central theme, Wakanda, Tenoch, and the surface world. Perhaps the most powerful and consistent cultural and historical theme running through Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, is the theme of colonialism and its consequences. The film is at its most fundamental level a story about what happens to civilizations that possess something the powerful want, and about the lengths to which those civilizations must go to survive and protect their sovereignty. Wakanda's entire history is defined by its relationship to this threat. The nation has survived by hiding. Its technological superiority and its vibranium have been protected not through military dominance over other nations but through concealment. By pretending to be poor and underdeveloped, Wakanda avoided becoming a target for the kind of colonial extraction that devastated the rest of the African continent. T'Challa's decision in the first film to reveal Wakanda's true nature to the world was both a moral act and a strategic gamble, and Wakanda Forever shows the consequences of that gamble as other nations immediately begin trying to find and claim vibranium for themselves. Tolokin's relationship to this same theme is even more direct and more historically grounded. Tolokin was created specifically because of colonialism. Its people fled into the ocean to escape the Spanish conquistadors. Their existence beneath the sea is the ultimate act of hiding, of removing themselves so completely from the world above that the destroyers could not find them. Namor's hatred of the surface world is not irrational or simply villainous. It is the entirely logical response of a man who has watched colonialism from beneath the ocean for 500 years, who has seen what the surface world does to civilizations it considers weaker or less important, and who has spent those 5 centuries ensuring that his people will never be subjected to the same fate. The film essentially presents 2 models of survival for civilizations under colonial threat: Wakanda's model of revelation and engagement, of bringing the truth of your power into the open and betting that the world will respect it, and Tolokin's model of absolute concealment and defensive isolation, of never letting the world know you exist so that it can never come for what you have. The conflict between these 2 civilizations, and their eventual alliance, suggests that neither model is sufficient on its own, that the future of all people who have been pushed to the margins of power requires solidarity and mutual defense rather than isolation or competition. This is not an abstract philosophical argument. It is a direct reflection of ongoing debates within real communities around the world about how best to survive and resist in the face of systems that continue to extract, exploit, and marginalize. The film is asking its audience, many of whom belong to those communities, to think about these questions and to recognize that the fictional kingdoms of Wakanda and Tolokin are mirrors held up to the real world with all its ongoing injustices and all its ongoing resilience. Representation and its meaning. It is impossible to discuss the cultural significance of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever without addressing what it means for the audiences who see themselves in it, because for many of those audiences, this film is not primarily a Marvel movie. It is a statement of existence and dignity. For Black audiences around the world, the Black Panther franchise represents something that Hollywood had denied them for most of its history. A vision of African and diasporic Blackness that is powerful, sophisticated, beautiful, and fully human. Not a sidekick. Not a victim. Not a criminal. Not a servant. A king. A queen. A warrior. A scientist. A civilization. The response to the original Black Panther in 2018, with its sold-out screenings and its enormous collective emotional weight, reflected the depth of hunger that existed for this kind of representation, and Wakanda Forever deepened and expanded that representation with an even larger and more diverse ensemble of Black characters given full emotional and narrative space. For Latin American and specifically indigenous Mexican audiences, the introduction of Tolokin and the Talacano characters represented something similarly historic. For generations, indigenous Mexican and Central American culture in Hollywood had been either invisible or reduced to the most limiting and dehumanizing stereotypes: poverty, violence, drug trafficking, and illegal immigration. The image of a proud, ancient, and extraordinarily powerful Mesoamerican civilization at the center of a major Hollywood blockbuster, speaking their own language and wearing versions of their own historical dress, was genuinely unprecedented. Mabel Cadena, who plays Namora, described the experience of seeing her face in a movie like this as something she had never expected to happen in her lifetime. She spoke about having grown up without ever seeing someone who looked like her treated as a hero in mainstream cinema, and about what it meant not just personally but to the younger generation of indigenous Mexican children who would now see themselves in the world's most popular entertainment franchise. The film's commitment to casting actors of the specific cultural heritage it was depicting, rather than simply using any available Latin American actors regardless of background, was noticed and appreciated. The core Talacano cast is composed of Mexican actors of indigenous and Afro-Mexican heritage, making the on-screen representation as authentic as possible. A film of and for the world's margins. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever is, in the end, a film about the margins of the world. It is about the civilizations and the peoples who have been pushed to the edges of power, hidden from view, robbed of their resources and their dignity, and forced to develop strategies of survival in a world that has repeatedly tried to destroy them. It is about whether those people, and those civilizations, can find solidarity with each other rather than being manipulated into conflict by the powers that have always benefited from their division. It is about what it means to grieve while still having to fight, to carry the weight of loss while still showing up to protect the people you love. These are not fictional concerns. Every historical reference embedded in the film, from the Mayan language spoken by the Talacano to the name of Toussaint carried by Chala's son to the name of Lumumba connected to Ramonda's family line to the geopolitical maneuvering of powerful Western governments seeking access to vibranium, points to real histories and real ongoing struggles. Ryan Coogler and his team did not make a superhero movie with a few cultural references sprinkled in for authenticity. They made a deeply political and culturally serious film that uses the extraordinary platform of the Marvel Cinematic Universe to tell a story that could not be more relevant to the world we actually live in. That is the true cultural and historical legacy of Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. Not the box office numbers, impressive as they are. Not the Oscar nominations, deserved as they are. But the fact that it made the histories and the struggles and the beauty of communities that the world has too often ignored the center of its story, and did so with enough craft, sincerity, and love that audiences around the world responded to it as something genuinely meaningful in their lives.